All right, Erev Tov. We are going to every single time I teach, I always need anyone needs siyata dishmaya, which means the help of heaven's help of Hashem. Especially tonight, I do because for two reasons. One, as we were talking about before the tape started to roll, this impending deal about the hostages has not made me a very happy camper tonight. So my mind is elsewhere. And number two, the topic, the second half of this parak, which we'll hopefully finish tonight, is a bit heavy. It's not heavy. It's just we have to really think about what we're talking about. I'm going to try and make this as simple as possible, and then we're going to hear from Rabbi Silverberg for about 10 minutes at the end of this chapter to kind of not summarize, but explain a couple of things at the end of the chapter that I think he does a magnificent job with. In order for us to pick up where we were, we need to do a little review. This is part 2, chapter 20. Hopefully it's the first part 2 and the second and the final part. We saw last time that the first of the 2 Aseret HaDibrot, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, and Lo Yeh Lecha Elohim Acherim Al Panai, you shall have no foreign gods, represent 2 things. The first one being all the mitzvot aseh, all the positive commandments. The second one representing all the negative commandments. So we posed the question, well, how can that be? How is it that all the positive fall into the first one and all the negative into the second one? And we discussed the idea in general terms so far, and it's going to have to get much more in depth later, that, and we kind of saw this also in the last chapter, that a mitzvah, a positive commandment, is that which brings us closer to Hashem, and a Aveira is something that takes us further away from God. That which brings us closer falls under the category of Anochi Hashem Elokecha. And by not doing the right thing, and by sinning, and we're in a sense doing what's called avodah zarah. We're serving a foreign god. We're not serving Hashem. If we're not serving Hashem, we're serving ourselves, another god, and that falls into the second category. And on top of that, we also discussed the topic of the oneness of God. We said it can't just mean he's unique, or there's only one Hashem. It had to have a deeper meaning. We talked a little bit about that as well. The goal of this chapter and the next few chapters is the idea of the average person, not someone whose feet are to the fire almost literally, in order to get them to renounce their Judaism or something, that their ahava mesuteret, the hidden love, comes through. But the average Jew, how we can access that. But as has been his process since the beginning of the book, he kind of lays out a whole bunch of little puzzle pieces. And he explains this puzzle piece, and says, oh, wait, here's one more piece. And then at some point puts them all together. So we're in the early stages of putting some puzzle pieces together. What are those stages? Number 1, the first 2 of the Aseret HaDibrot, the positive commandments, the negative commandments are included completely in those 2. The oneness of Hashem in Od Milvado, there's nothing besides Hashem. And where we left off last week was this last statement. Let me make this bigger, even a little bit more. But it says that we also talked about the idea that when it comes to Hashem, Hashem's oneness is unique in the sense that nothing changed in Hashem from before the creation of the world to the after the creation of the world. As it said over here, I'm just going to go back to this one quote. The quote over here, Atahu ad shelo nivra ha'olam. You are who you were before the world was created. Atahu mishinivra. You are the same as before after the world was created. Meaning, umamash bli shum shinui. Hashem is unchanged. And I'm going to read this last paragraph as a springboard into tonight's class, because we left off on the last line, but I just want to read these few lines. Ki olam hazeh, this world, and all the upper worlds, einam po'alim shum shinui b'achduto yiparach b'boram me'ayin liyesh. The fact that the upper worlds and this world and everything was created does not make any difference and cause any change in the oneness of Hashem. Shekamo shayahu levado uyachid umyuchad kodem hiboram, just like he was one, unique before their creation. Ken hu levado uyachid umyuchad achar shebara'am. He's the same one, unique, after they were created. Mishum, and with absolutely no change. Why? Misha, and this is what we're going to pick up on tonight for most of the rest of this chapter. Mishum dichalo kama kolo chashiv, dechola kama kolo chashiv uchayin be'efes mamash. That next to Hashem, relative to God, everything else the entire universe, all human beings, everything that exists is like nothing relative to God. What does that mean? That let's say a person is walking down the street. This is not a good example, but it popped into my head. Person's walking down the street and a fleck of dust floats by, lands on their shoulder, and then floats away. That doesn't change me. Let's say it's me walking. It doesn't change me. It's so utterly insignificant in everything of my life. It's absolutely a complete zero. Lahavdil, Hashem is the human in this case, and that fleck of dust is the entire universe. Okay, and that therefore there is no change in God by His creating the world. Okay, very nice. What are we going to do with that? So let's take a look. This is where we left off last week. I'm going to read this, and I'm going to give a general understanding of what we're talking about here, as to the best of my ability. But let me give you a little introduction, a reminder. We talked about many times about the idea that there's machashava, dibur, ma'aseh. There's thought, speech, and action. Above thought, speech, and action, we also have our seichel, we have our intellect. Below that, we have our midot. In this case, we mean the emotions. So we have intellect, our emotional being, we have our thoughts, our speech, and our action. Keep that hierarchy in your mind as we go through this. It's going to make a difference. It's going to make an important difference as we talk about this. He's now going to give us an example of what does this mean. Number one, that next to Hashem, like the creation of the world was a zero, so to speak. To him, it didn't make any difference to God. It's insignificant. How does that inform us about his oneness? And what are we going to do with that information? Okay, so I'm going to start here at the beginning of the page. Ula mashal, and for an example or for a parable. When a person speaks a single word, I say the word cat. That word cat, from the moment I was born, 1959, till right now, the fact that I said the word cat is 1 bazillion% insignificant in my life. It's a word. Even when it comes to the idea of the person's ability to speak, he says, pay attention, he says. We're talking about the 3-level thing. We talked machashava, dibur, ma'aseh, thought, speech, action. That at that level, that middle level, one word that I say of speech, absolutely insignificant. Why? Because if I could speak in an infinite amount of words. There's no amount of words I can speak. I can speak. Bezrat Hashem, I'll be able to speak for many years. So that one word I speak, relative to my ability to speak and that power of dibur, of speech, is absolutely insignificant. The kol shekain, and even more so, how insignificant that word cat that I say is, relative to a person's thoughts, and I'm explaining this in a minute. Even more so, that word is insignificant. Remember that in the hierarchy, the thoughts a higher level up. Because where does the speech come from? It starts off as a thought. So in other words, the thought is a higher level. So if I already say that the one word I speak with my ability and powers of speech is absolutely insignificant, how much more so is it insignificant relative to my ability to think? And for sure, when it comes to the upper level, above the level machashavat, our neshama, she'en esa bechinotea na chabad, shemehen nimshechu otiot machashava zo amubashot b'dibur zeh. What happens? We talked about this quite in depth, quite a long time ago. It's a process that we're not aware of, but it happens every time we speak. Most people think before they speak. Not everybody. But even if they don't think before they speak, they do. Because in order to form a word, our brain has to think of the word. So in order to think of the word, then we have a thought in our mind, then the words come out of our mouth. So we're saying that this insignificant, you'll see why he's building out like a spoiler alert right now, okay? The spoiler alert is that when God created the world, we talked about this again in earlier chapters, Hashem created the world with 10 utterances, 10 statements. And we're going to see that relative to God is a zero. It's insignificant. Just like our one word is insignificant to our greater ability to speak and even our greater ability to think. Because our thoughts also have a level of words in them. What does that mean? Our thoughts have level of words. We don't speak, we don't say the words, but we hear in our head, right? If I'm thinking about this hostage deal that the government's gonna maybe make tonight, and I'm not talking about it, I'm just thinking about it. Well, how am I thinking about it? It's not a pictograph or a pictogram. I'm in my head, there are words going through. They're not words, physical words, but it's a higher level. It's thought, which allows me then to speak if I want to. So we say over here, I'm right here. And it is that it is our machashava, our thoughts, that give life to the words. What does that mean? It's a nice poetic way of saying it, but what infuses our words with meaning? If I just said mefizzle, there's no such word, mefizzle, right? But if I have a word like, again, cat, you have the ability to understand what I'm saying because you know in your brain what a cat is. And my brain had an image of a cat, a word popped in, and it comes out of my mouth. So what gives life to the words is the machashava, the thoughts. I already did this. Sorry, I went back a little bit. Let's continue. Here, starting here, where it says Kia machashava. Kia machashava. I'm finding my book now. Just like I was saying before, that just like our speech actually uses words, so too do our minds and our thoughts use words, like speech. What's the difference between the words I speak and the words I think? If I close my mouth now and I just think of the word cat, okay? So I thought of the word, and I said the word cat. What's the difference? It's spiritual. What is it spiritual? I can't point to the word I just said. I can't say, oh, did you hear that? It's impossible. It's more of a spiritual thing. Yet so therefore, a single word that I say is insignificant to all the words I could possibly say. It's absolutely insignificant to the higher level of machashava. Aval eser bechinot chochma bina v'dat and shorash u'makor machashava. Our chochma, bina, da'at are the source, the essence of our thought process. What does that mean? Remember that hierarchy. We talk a lot about the machashava, dibur ba'aseh, right? But above that, we said that there are the midot, there are the emotions, and above that, the intellect. So if in the middle case over here of these three, machashava, dibur, ma'aseh, thought, speech, and action, if in the middle section here, speech, a single word is insignificant, how much more so here by the thought process? And even more so when you go up to the highest level of intellect, of seichel, which forms the ideas. In order to have the word cat, your brain had to have a higher level of consciousness of the letter C, the letter A, the sound it makes, the T. What is a cat? It goes even above the level of the mind, of the machashava. Now he's going to give us a little bit more. Again, now I said I'm kind of going to go through this last part of the chapter, just reading general explanation, and then we're going to kind of get a little bit deeper into it. Because if you can see, I have lots of notes written all over my page. I can't read them, but that's okay. Just it looks very impressive, so I had to show you. I see, Mark, you're very impressed. Okay. Then he says like this. Just need to look for my book. Lemashal. When you feel a sense of desire for something, a certain sense of love for something, that feeling first comes to you. Before it moves from the heart to the brain, till you get to the point where the brain starts to think about it. When there's an emotion, there's no word yet. You don't think. Your emotion doesn't have words. It's feelings, right? If I feel a sense of love or desire or something of that nature, those aren't words. Those are feelings. In order to concretize that, like I love my wife, that then went from the heart to the seichel, to the intellect. Then it went down a level. Then it came into my chashava, my thought, and then finally into dibur. So at the point that it's still an emotion, there's no words involved. They're just, okay, there's no words. Otiot means letters, but in this case, it means words. As ein ba bechinat otiot adayin, rak chefetz pashut. It's a simple desire, v'chashika balev, or a wanting, a longing in the heart. Ela davarahu hanechmad etzlo. I walk down the street and I'm thinking about, oh man, I really like some pizza. But it's not so much that, because that's already a thought process. I'm getting hungry, right? I'm hungry. Or maybe I want to have pizza. I want to watch a certain show. I think about I love my wife. I love my family. These are feelings. Feelings lack words. I'll give you an example. If someone says to you, I feel very happy. Now, can you point to where you're happy? No, you can't point to it. It's like it's a feeling. It's a spiritual thing. And not necessarily with a capital S, but it's a spiritual thing. Where's he going with this, by the way? We're going to see. And even especially before his desire was there for this particular item, the potential to have the thought of love, the potential to have a thought of desire of something was there. He knew that such a thing existed, but it hadn't yet been awakened yet, even in him. It's something very special and beautiful and wonderful. Lahasigo, to get, lidabekbo, and to acquire, to cling to, kigon, lilmod ezo chokhma, to learn some kind of a science, some kind of a intellectual item, or to eat something very good. Only after he starts to feel it. Like, I know that don't ask me why, but I actually finally started to read Physics for Dummies. I really want to start to learn physics at some point in my life, and I hope it takes me 50 years to learn it. But before I got to the point where I have a desire to learn something, I knew that it was out there. It was out there somewhere. But then it came to a feeling that I wanted to learn it. My mind then concretized it, and I started to think about it, and then I spoke about it and did something with it. So even before that happens, then after the feeling aspect, it then goes from the heart, the feeling, to the mind, to then think about it, how to actually to execute that, how to go from potential, I have the love or the hunger or desire for something, to actually put it into practice. For example, to get the food, or to learn the actual subject you want to learn. So what happens? It goes from a feeling that lacks all words to a point where now there's words that are coming up in your head, to the point where they're spoken. Then they become executed as becoming words, speech that people use. Wow. Okay, there's a lot he just said here. Let me try and make it very simple first. And what's the point? Let's not lose sight of the fact that the long game here is, in the next few chapters, including this one, is what is the Ahava Mesuteret? Okay, we discussed it in the last chapter 19 in depth. How do we get the Ahava Mesuteret where we can access it to keep Torah mitzvot properly? In order to get there, remember the puzzle pieces. Hashem is only one. first two commandments, all the negative prohibition, the negative commandments, the positive commandments. We talk about the Achdut Tov Hashem, the uniqueness of God, whatever he quotes. And then we talked about the fact that because relative to God, everything is insignificant. And he gives us an example. What does that mean? He uses a human example. My saying cat is insignificant. It's insignificant even just at the level of speech. In my entire life, the word cat, by saying it now, means absolutely nothing. And don't tell me about the butterfly effect. Okay? It's even more insignificant when it comes to my next level up, machashava. It's even more insignificant when I go up the level to emotions. And it's even more insignificant when I go up to the level of seichel, of intellect, because up there's no words. So it's insignificant altogether. So what? So now we can understand. It says, let me close it off here. It says that Hashem created the world with 10 utterances. There were 10 utterances Hashem created the world. We just said that the universe is insignificant relative to God. That also means that his utterances relative to the greatness of God is also insignificant. So what he's doing now is proving the concept and point. Like, for example, when I just said the word cat, did that change me? Didn't change me. Didn't change anything about my life. Didn't change the future. My future didn't change absolutely anything. I'm the same Zev before and I'm the same Zev after I said that. Lahavdil. What we're saying about Hashem is that the insignificance of Hashem's, for us to create yesh me'ayin, ex nihilo, or something out of nothing, is impossible. It goes against what is called the third law of thermonuclear dynamics, which is, don't ask me why I know this, matter can neither be created nor destroyed. I can't create anything from nothing, nor can I destroy anything. It always becomes something else. The molecules cannot be destroyed. They can go from a solid to a liquid to a gas, but they still exist. Only Hashem could create something out of nothing. Or some students on tests, they have no idea what they're talking about, and they can come up with some gibberish. Now, we say, whoa, it's unbelievable how much Hashem did. It must be fantastic and unbelievable and awesome. What a grand being Hashem is because of that. And he'll go, piece of cake, it's nothing. It's the word cat relative to eternity. Is it $1 significant? So the answer is, yeah, $1 significant. If I have $1 million, is $1 significant? Yeah, not necessarily, because to get to $1 million, you need $1 and another $1. But if something is infinite, I have an infinite amount of money, $1 is no longer significant at all, because there's always more. But if I have $1 million, to get to the million, I need 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. A drop of water is absolutely insignificant, right? But it is significant because without one drop and another drop, you don't have a glass of water. You don't have a lake. You don't have a river. You don't have an ocean. So each one drop is itself seemingly insignificant, but it is significant because it's part of a bigger. But what if you have an infinite amount of water? Then that one drop, present or not, makes absolutely no difference. Hashem's infinite. Hashem always was, is, and will be here. There's nothing that Hashem cannot do. So his power is infinite. If that's the case, the utterances of Hashem creating the world, absolutely insignificant. Hashem doesn't change from who he was before the creation of the world, and he didn't change because he created the world. He's using this because it's important for us to understand the next stage, which he's going to. Now, what I'd like to do is the following. Make this small. I want you just to let me know that you can hear this. I'm going to play about 12 minutes. He just, in this tape here, he just finished teaching this parak, like we just finished. And he's going to give us a good, not just an explanation of what we've been talking about, but he gives a very interesting perspective as well, based on Parshat Chayei Sarah, which we just read a couple of weeks ago. When he was doing this, it was happening Parshat Chayei Sarah, and he used an example from there. So I'm going to play this. Just shake your head. Yes, you can hear it or not. Okay.
So to end this Perek, the 10 Mamores are insignificant relative to Hashem because he quantitatively and qualitatively is infinitely greater. So the fact that they exist doesn't create any any change in Hashem's essence, because to him it's all utterly insignificant. So are we insignificant?
Oh, I wanted to introduce the question we just asked. If that's the case, if we are so insignificant, what are we doing here? Right? That piece of dust on my proverbial shoulder before, right? So like, it's insignificant. Did it make any difference in my life? No. So should it make any difference in Hashem's existence, so to speak, that we're here? If we're so insignificant, so that's what we're going to talk about first.
No, what did we just learn in this Perek?
Sounds like the world is insignificant.
It sounds like most of us are residents of this world, unless we had some aliens over here. And if the world is insignificant, then by definition we're insignificant.
Right.
So we're all what's the word I'm looking for? We're insignificant. So what's the point?
But even more,
Why are we taking ourselves so seriously? Why are we sitting here and learning Tanya? We may as well go and enjoy ourselves. If we're anyways insignificant, no?
So the question is, why did Hashem create us?
Why did Hashem create this insignificant place?
Why did he do it?
Yeah,
Hashem creates insignificant things. As for Shalom,
it's a big problem.
because the Kodesh Baruch Hu must be so good.
not a problem at all. We're creations of.
Ankin chshivas and ganzen nicht.
I got it. Maybe Hashem also wants to be insignificant, and we would make a deer for him to be insignificant.
You have a lot of theories.
That was
The answer is that we are of absolute significance, and the world is of absolute significance. 1 second, and how does that work? And how does it work with the Perek? And it's not a contradiction at all. It's not a contradiction at all. How's it not a contradiction? So let's talk about this parsha, this week's parsha a little. So this week's parsha talks about Chai Sarah, right? The life of Sarah. What is the life of Sarah? The Yitzhak gets a shidduch. That's the life of the mother when the child gets a shidduch. So Yitzhak goes and gets a shidduch, but he doesn't go. Eliezer goes. Was it Eliezer?
Yeah.
Where does it say that it was Eliezer?
Eved Hashem, it's Eliezer.
Eved Hashem, you mean Eved Avram?
Avram.
Where does it say
Doesn't
that?
mention his name in the Bible.
His name isn't mentioned. Isn't that amazing? His name, whole story about him, long part. His name isn't mentioned. Does Rashi tell us his name?
But everybody knows.
Oh,
יש עצה טובה, יש עכשיו יוזמה, ברוך השם, של ארגון נפלא.
How do we know? His name isn't mentioned in the parsha. Eved Avram, right?
Yeah.
And the reason why his name isn't mentioned is because he's insignificant. Why is he insignificant? Because he's Eved Avram. He doesn't have an identity. What is his identity? Is that he's Avram's servant, so he doesn't have his own identity. He doesn't have his own. In fact, when he's asked to sit down and eat, the first thing he stands up and says, "No, I'm sorry, I'm not eating. I have to speak first." And what is his first words out of his mouth? Eved Avraham Anochi. I want you to know. You want to know who I am? I don't have a name. I don't have an identity. Eved Avraham Anochi. I am the what? The servant of Avram I am. And by the way, what's interesting is I always found interesting about these words. He didn't say Anochi Eved Avraham. He didn't start with I. Anochi. No, I am Anochi Eved. Which, by the way, Anochi Eved Avram and Eved Avram Anochi in Hebrew they're interchangeable, right? But by Matan Torah, Hashem didn't say Hashem Aleikecha Anochi. He said Anochi Hashem Aleikecha. Yeah, Shmuel Anochi Haroya. Why didn't he say Anochi Eved Avram? No, there's no. The Anochi can't come before the Eved Avram.
But Avram was
First Eved Avram Anochi.
Avram was very rich, and Eliezer took care of. He was the treasurer. He trusted him so much.
But that is the greatness of Eliezer. The greatness of Eliezer was his insignificance, his absolute bittul to Avram. Had Eliezer thought himself to be something, then he would be nothing. His somethingness was in his nothingness. And here's what's fascinating. Rashi does tell us his name, but if you go through the whole parsha, keep on reading it, doesn't say it. And suddenly, towards the end of the story, so it says over there that Eliezer told, when he's talking to Besuel and to Lavan, so he says that he's recounting the conversation that he had with Avram, and he says, He told Avram, Ulai lo yeva isha lalachas acharai. Maybe the woman won't want to come after me. So Rashi points out that the word ulai is written without a vav. Elai ksiv. The word ulai without a vav means elai to me. And Rashi says that the Bas Hoyel Eliezer had a daughter, and he wanted to have a shidduch with Avraham Avinu. That's the first place that Eliezer is identified. In the Chumash, he's not identified at all. In Rashi, that's the first place he's identified. Why is he identified over there? Because this is the first time in the story where his ego appeared.
I should get it.
First time in the story where he's not being the Eved Avram. The first time in the story where he said, I have a daughter, when you want? Oh, suddenly you have a name. Suddenly you're Eliezer. And you know what's interesting is how does that Rashi end? What does Avram tell him? Can't work. Why? Because B'ni Baruch, my son is Baruch, and you're utter. What is the moment that the ego makes an appearance? Suddenly we have an utter going on over here. Suddenly we have an utter because that's the moment. It's fascinating how whole time Eved Avram beautiful. And who are we to talk about Eliezer? But the Gemara talks. The Gemara says that there was a. I don't remember where it is, but there was a Meira who spoke against Avram. It means in the Rambam. I think it's the Rambam who says something about Eliezer, and the Ravid says, Eliezer is going to come, he's going to whip you. Eliezer is not a. This is Kleinigkeit. Eliezer is a very great person. Delo Mashka, Halavai, we should, and be anywhere near his level. And Chazal tell us that Yafas Yichasan Shal Avdi Avos Yeshem Tirasan Shal Banim. That Hashem treasures the words of the servants of the Avos more than the Torah of the children. I guess that would be us, our Torah. So I don't want to start out with Eliezer over here. But at the end, and I want to acknowledge his greatness. But at the same time, the moment that even a drop of ego entered, suddenly he lost status. His greatness was the Eved Avram, that he was nothing. What does that have to do with what we're talking about? Do you know why the world is important? Do you know why we're important?
Because we're insignificant.
Not because we have any intrinsic significance. We don't. We're utterly insignificant in the grand scheme of things. You know why we're significant? Because Hashem chose us. Because Hashem wants us. But what that means is not that we're significant. That means that Hashem is significant. Let me explain that by way of an example. If I look at this Tanya and I say, wow, it's a beautiful Tanya. Nice binding, new print. It actually just came out a few years ago. So I want this. Is that a commentary on me or a commentary on the Tanya? It's a little of both, right? But why do I want this Tanya? Because it is important, significant, and beautiful, and it has something to it. That's why I want it. So my desire for it is a commentary on it, on how great it is. By Hashem, when Hashem wanted the world, it's not because Hashem looked at the world and said, wow, this is such a beautiful, appealing thing. It made an impression on me. It all started with a self-generated desire. By way of example, if you have two apples in front of you, they're both exactly equal, and you choose one of them. Is that an example of bechira, of real choice? Because you could have chosen either one? No, it's not an example of real choice. Why not? Because they're both the same. So you have two apples, you chose one of them. So let's say I say, you can't have the one. Here, you give that to me, take the other one. Are you going to be upset?
No.
Right.
The election's over.
What? But what if you have an enikel? You have an eniklach? You have one that's, let's say, 3 years old? Yes, imagine you take the kid, take two red lollipops, and you show it to the kid, and you say, which one do you want? The kid looks, takes one of them. And then you say to the kid, no, I want that one. Here's the other one. What's the kid going to do?
Fight for you.
Have a tantrum, right? Why? Because it's not about the lollipop, it's about him. What's special about this, there's nothing special about this lollipop over the other one, but I decided that I want it, and that's what makes it special. So is the lollipop really special? No. The specialness is conferred only by the child who decides to. When Hashem says, I want this world, even though it's utterly insignificant and it's completely irrational, we have no understanding of why he chose this world. But he says, for whatever reason it is, and it's bechira, it's absolute choice, free choice. The world is significant because I want to be in this world. I want a mishkan and a world where I can dwell. I want Yidden to do Torah mitzvahs, and when a Yid does a mitzvah, it means the world to me. And when a Yid does an Avera, it devastates me. But that's Hashem's choice. It's not because essentially your act is consequential, or because essentially you're consequential. You're not and your act isn't. But it is because Hashem chose it. And because Hashem chose it, not only are you a little significant, but that's the greatest significance that there can be. Your greatest significance is that Hashem thinks you're important and wants you and loves you and chooses you. But all this doesn't make a difference to Hashem. Why? Because that's nothing outside of Him. There's nothing important outside of Him. What is important? His desire. That's all that there is His desire and His choice. That's what makes you important. You don't have independent significance. If you had independent significance, then there's something other than Hashem. Then there's a change in Hashem. But because you don't have any independent significance, it's all about Hashem, so therefore, there's still Einod Movade. There's nothing but Hashem and His desire and His choice. By the way, are you beginning to see an answer to your question about words? A little? Try to apply it. Anyways. So when I view myself as something, and I view myself as a significant being on my own merits, then I'm nothing. Because my own merits really are inconsequential. Going back to Eved Avram. If Eliezer thinks that he's something, he's nothing. The moment he realizes he's Eved Avram, he's nothing, and his significance is that he's Eved Avram, then he's everything. Then he's everything. Eved Melach Melach, the Chazal tell us, the servant of the king gets the respect like the king himself. It's in Rashi somewhere, right? Eved Melach Melach. When we realize that what makes us special and important is the ultimate importance, is the specialness and importance that Hashem conferred upon us, then we're really going strong. And then we're on the right track. And then we're taka something. We're taka something. But that something is something that belongs to Hashem, the gift that Hashem gave us. And that's the ultimate, riddle of life, whatever you want to call it. If I think I'm something, I'm nothing. But if I think I'm nothing, in other words, and everything that I have is from Hashem, and that my specialness and uniqueness, which is incredible, this is not a reason to be depressed, this is not a reason to have a low self-esteem, to the contrary, Hashem chose me. But if I realize that I ultimately are nothing, and everything is Hashem, and everything, my specialness and uniqueness was granted to me by Hashem, then I am everything.
Okay. I remember when I learned this a few years back, and I went back to look for this, was very moved by this idea. This is absolutely brilliant. And I want to tell you a brief story to end with that I know I've told, I don't know which class I said it in, so I'm going to say it now because it fits in here perfectly. Just over 100 years ago, right before Rosh Hashanah, 100 years ago in 1923, Rabbi Meir Shapiro Zatzal instituted the idea of Daf Yomi, learning a page of Gemara every day, and then after 7.5 years, we'll have gone through the entire cycle of the Talmud of Bavli. Now he was a young man. In order to present this idea, he went to the Chavetz Chaim, who was the Gadol Hador, the greatest man of the generation, and he told him about the idea, and he wanted the Chavetz Chaim to sell it. The Chavetz Chaim said, "Nope, I ain't nothing doing. It's your idea." And it turned out that it was going to be a worldwide conference, Knessia. I don't remember if it was in Krakow. I don't remember where it was. Somewhere in Poland, likely. And there's going to be this worldwide conference, and there will be many, many people at this conference. And the Chavetz Chaim told Rav Shapiro, I want you to present the idea at the Knessia. He says, "I'm nobody. You're the Chavetz Chaim." He says, "No, you're going to do it, but you have to do one thing. I want you to come to this conference when the opening plenum, like the opening session, 15 minutes late." So, why? He says, "I want you to come 15 minutes late, then I'll explain." So comes the day, And the Chavetz Chaim gets up to speak, to begin the program. And he's giving his talk and whatever else he's doing. And in the back of the hall, the doors open, and in walks Rav Meir Shapiro. Chavetz Chaim gets off the dais. He walked down all the way to the end of the room, took Rav Meir Shapiro by the hand, brought him up to the front, and said, "This is my friend, Rav Meir Shapiro. He has a brilliant idea he would like to present." Now, why did the Chavetz Chaim do that? Because Chavetz Chaim knew who he was. Again, a person, it doesn't, when we talked about this before, that Moshe Rabbeinu saying he was the most humble, didn't mean he said, I'm a nothing, I'm a nobody. He knew who he was, but he accepted that everything was because Hashem helped him to do it. So too the Chavetz Chaim. So why did the Chavetz Chaim do this? Because now he has the stamp of approval. This man, Meir Shapiro, that's how became significant, because the Chavetz Chaim made him significant. And therefore his idea was significant, and his acceptance of the idea was significant. And proof is, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who learn Daf Yomi every day because of that meeting. It's unbelievable. Again, Meir Shapiro floated the idea on his own. He'd sent out a few emails in a WhatsApp group. Okay, maybe people, it wouldn't have, no way it would have caught on like it did. Only because Chavetz Chaim gave it the significance. Okay, so the reason I want to make sure this was so clear is that you can come away from this chapter feeling like, if I'm so insignificant, then what's the whole point? Why am I even wasting my time doing a mitzvah? Why do I have to daven? Why do I have to keep Shabbat? I'm insignificant. What does it care? It's that piece of dust on my shoulder. Because the fact is, as Rav Silverberg said, and Tanya and Alter Rebbe himself said, the fact that Hashem chose us is what made us significant. And therefore, our understanding that we are significant because only of Hashem, that's our greatness, and that's our significance. All right. Bezrat Hashem. I'll give you a week for that all to sink in. We will pick it up next week. Bezrat Hashem, same bat time, same bat channel. Have a good evening.